Hi, this is Dr. Rishita Sharma, and in today's lecture, we are going to discuss the concept of discharge of torts under the law of torts. Now, tort law is a branch of civil law that addresses civil wrongs, providing a legal framework for individuals to seek remedies for harm caused by others. Torts can be broadly classified into intentional torts, negligence, and strict liability. When a tort occurs, it creates a legal obligation for the wrongdoer to compensate the injured party. However, like any legal obligation, there are circumstances under which torts can be discharged or legally terminated. This write-up delves into the concept of discharge of torts, examining the various ways in which these civil wrongs can come to an end. Now let us first understand torts before delving into the discharge of torts. It is crucial to understand the nature of torts themselves. Torts can be categorized into three main types. First, intentional torts. These occur when a person intentionally commits an act that results in harm to others. Examples include assault, battery, trespass, and defamation. Intent is a key element in intentional torts, and the wrongdoer is held liable for the consequences of their actions. Next comes negligence. Negligence involves the failure to exercise reasonable care, resulting in harm to others. To establish negligence, the plaintiff must demonstrate that the defendant owed a duty of care, breached that duty, and caused harm as a result of the breach. Negligence is not intentional but arises from a lack of due care. Now, strict liability. Strict liability torts do not require proof of intent or negligence. Instead, the focus is on the act itself and the resulting harm. Like, let's take the product liability cases, which fall under strict liability. Holding manufacturers responsible for defects in their products regardless of intent or negligence. Now coming to elements of a tort, regardless of the type of tort, certain elements must be present to establish a valid claim. These elements generally include duty of care. The defendant must owe a duty of care to the plaintiff. The nature and extent of this duty depend on the circumstances and the relationship between the parties. Then breach of that duty. The defendant must breach the duty of care owed to the plaintiff. This breach can either be through intentional actions or negligence or strict liability. Next is causation. There must be a direct causal link between the defendant's breach of duty and the harm suffered by the plaintiff. The harm must be a foreseeable consequence of the defendant's actions. And next is damages. The plaintiff must suffer actual harm or damages as a result of the defendant's actions. Now, the nature of damages can be physical, emotional, or financial. Now, let's come to the concept of discharge of torts after understanding what is torts. Discharge of torts refers to the legal termination of a tortious liability. Various factors and legal principles can lead to the discharge of torts, releasing the wrongdoer from further liability. The discharge can occur before or after legal proceedings are initiated, depending on the circumstances. Let's see some common ways in which torts can be discharged. Consent. One of the primary ways to discharge a tort is through the consent of the injured party. If the plaintiff consents to the defendant's actions, it serves as a valid defense against a tort claim. However, for consent to be valid, it must be informed, voluntary, and not obtained through coercion or fraud. Let's take an example of medical procedures. A common scenario involving consent is in the context of medical procedures. Patients typically provide informed consent before undergoing surgery or other medical treatments. If a patient consents to a specific medical procedure and later suffers harm as a result, the healthcare provider may use this consent as a defense against a potential medical malpractice claim. Release and waiver. A release or waiver is a legal document in which the injured party voluntarily gives up their right to pursue a claim against the wrongdoer. These documents are often used in activities involving inherent risks, such as sports, recreational activities, or certain contractual relationships. Let's see an example. Recreational activities. When individuals participate in activities like skydiving, bungee jumping, or other high-risk sports, they may be required to sign a release or waiver. By signing such a document, participants acknowledge the risks involved and agree not to hold the organizers liable for any injuries that may occur during the activity. Accord and satisfaction. Accord and satisfaction is a contractual concept that can be applied to the discharge of tort claims. It involves an agreement between the parties where the injured party accepts something of value, the accord, in satisfaction of the original claim. Once the accord is fulfilled, the tort claim is discharged. Again, an example. Settlement agreements. In tort cases, parties often reach settlement agreements to resolve disputes without going through a trial. The settlement amount serves as the accord, and once paid or fulfilled, it satisfies the plaintiff's claim, discharging the tort. Settlement agreements are common in personal injury lawsuits, where the parties negotiate a financial settlement to avoid protracted litigation. Statute of limitations. Every legal claim, including tort claims, is subject to a statute of limitations. The statute of limitations sets a time limit within which a plaintiff must file a lawsuit. If the plaintiff fails to file a lawsuit within this time frame, the claim may be barred and the tort discharged. Example, personal injury claims. In personal injury cases, the statute of limitations varies by jurisdiction. If a plaintiff fails to file a lawsuit within the specified time frame, which could range from 1 to several years, the defendant can raise the statute of limitations as a defense, resulting in the discharge of the tort claim. Release in bankruptcy. In some cases, a discharge of torts can occur through the bankruptcy process. When an individual files for bankruptcy, certain debts, including some tort liabilities, may be discharged, relieving the debtor of the obligation to pay. Example, financial liability for accidents. If an individual causes a car accident and is held financially liable for damages, but later files for bankruptcy, the discharge of debts in bankruptcy may extend to the financial liability arising from the accident. However, not all torts are dischargeable in bankruptcy, and intentional torts or torts involving certain wrongful conduct may survive the bankruptcy process. Change of circumstances. A change in circumstances may lead to the discharge of torts, particularly when the conditions that gave rise to the tortious liability no longer exist. This can occur through the actions of the parties involved or external factors. Example, nuisance claims. In nuisance claims, a change in the use of land or the surrounding environment may lead to the discharge of the tort. If a business that was initially a nuisance relocates or modifies its operations to reduce the impact on neighboring properties, the nuisance claim may be discharged. Legal immunity. Certain individuals and entities may enjoy legal immunity from tort liability in specific circumstances. Government entities, for example, may have immunity in certain situations, shielding them from tort claims. Example, governmental immunity. Governmental immunity protects government entities and their employees from certain tort claims. For instance, if a city employee is performing a governmental function such as maintaining public property, the city may be immune from liability for negligence in carrying out that function. Legal immunity can vary based on jurisdiction and the specific functions or activities involved. Contributory or comparative negligence. Contributory negligence and comparative negligence are legal doctrines that can affect the outcome of tort claims. In jurisdictions that follow contributory negligence, if the plaintiff's own negligence contributed to the harm, the plaintiff may be barred from recovering damages. In jurisdictions that follow comparative negligence, the plaintiff's recovery may be reduced based on the degree of their own negligence. Example, comparative negligence in a car accident. In a car accident case, if both parties are found to be negligent, the principle of comparative negligence may apply. If the plaintiff is determined to be 20% at fault, their recovery of damages would be reduced by 20%. In some cases, if the plaintiff's degree of fault exceeds a certain threshold, they may be completely barred from recovery. Now coming on to legal defenses in the discharge of torts. Apart from the general ways torts can be discharged, certain legal defenses play a crucial role in mitigating or eliminating liability in specific tort cases. These defenses are often used by defendants to contest the plaintiff's claims. Understanding these defenses is essential for a comprehensive examination of the discharge of torts. Self-defense. Self-defense is a common legal defense in cases involving intentional torts, particularly in situations where harm is inflicted to protect oneself or others. In such cases, the defendant argues that their actions were justified as a reasonable response to an imminent threat of harm. Example, assault and battery. If an individual reasonably believes they are in imminent danger of physical harm and uses force to protect themselves, the defense of self-defense may be raised. For instance, if someone physically attacks another person and the victim responds with force to prevent further harm, they may argue self-defense to discharge the tort of battery. Defense of others. Similar to self-defense, the defense of others allows individuals to use force to protect someone else from harm. This defense is applicable when the defendant reasonably believes that they or a third party are facing an imminent threat. Example, protecting a family member. If an individual witnesses someone assaulting their family member and intervenes to prevent further harm, the defense of others may be raised. The defendant would argue that their actions were necessary to protect a loved one, justifying the use of force. Defense of property. Individuals have the right to use reasonable force to defend their property in certain situations. This defense is often invoked in cases involving trespass or theft. Example, shopkeeper's privilege. A shopkeeper who reasonably believes that a person is attempting to steal merchandise may use a reasonable amount of force to detain the suspect until the police arrive. Shopkeeper's privilege is a recognized defense of property that may discharge the tort of false imprisonment or assault in such cases. Consent within legal boundaries. While general consent was discussed earlier, it's important to highlight that not all actions are covered by consent, and certain acts may be outside the scope of permissible consent. Example, medical malpractice. Consenting to a medical procedure does not excuse a healthcare professional from malpractice. If a medical professional deviates from the standard of care during a procedure, causing harm to the patient, consent may not discharge the tort of medical malpractice. Now, there are certain emerging trends in the discharge of torts. As legal systems evolve, new trends and considerations emerge within the discharge of torts. These trends reflect changes in societal attitudes, technological advancements, and the recognition of previously overlooked issues, like digital torts. With the increasing prevalence of digital communication and technology, the legal landscape has seen the emergence of digital or online torts. These include cyberbullying, online defamation, and invasion of privacy through digital means. Example, cyber defamation. As online platforms become a common space for communication, instances of cyber defamation have risen. Individuals may make false and damaging statements about others through social media or online forums. The discharge of such torts involves navigating the complexities of jurisdiction, freedom of speech, and the responsibilities of online platforms. Environmental torts. Concerns about environmental protection have led to an increased focus on torts related to environmental harm. Individuals and communities affected by pollution, hazardous waste, or other environmental issues seek remedies through tort law. Example, toxic tort claims. Residents living near a factory that releases harmful pollutants may file toxic tort claims against the company, seeking compensation for health issues and property damage. As environmental awareness grows, these cases raise questions about corporate responsibility and the discharge of environmental torts. Product liability and innovation. Advancements in technology and product innovation have given rise to complex issues in product liability. The discharge of torts in product liability cases involves considerations of design defects, manufacturing defects, and failure to warn. Example, autonomous vehicles. As autonomous vehicles become more prevalent, questions arise about the liability of manufacturers in the event of accidents. The discharge of torts in these cases involves examining whether the vehicle's design, programming, or maintenance contributed to the incident. Medical malpractice and informed consent. The discharge of torts in medical malpractice cases has evolved with an increased emphasis on informed consent. Patients' rights to be fully informed about medical procedures and potential risks play a significant role in the discharge of medical malpractice claims. Example, informed consent failures. If a healthcare professional fails to provide adequate information about the risks and alternatives of a medical procedure, the patient's consent may not be considered valid. In such cases, the discharge of torts involves assessing whether the lack of informed consent contributed to the harm suffered by the patient. Now, there are certain challenges in the discharge of torts. While the discharge of torts is a critical aspect of the legal system, it is not without challenges. These challenges can arise from complexities, societal expectations, or gaps in existing laws, like cross-border tort cases. As globalization continues, cross-border tort cases present challenges in terms of jurisdiction, applicable laws, and their enforcement. Determining which legal system governs a particular tort can be complex, leading to difficulties in the discharge of such cases. Example, defamation across borders. Defamatory statements made online may reach individuals in different jurisdictions. Discharging the tort of defamation in such cases requires addressing conflict of laws and ensuring that legal remedies are effective across borders. Complex causation issues. Some tort cases involve complex causation issues, making it challenging to establish a direct link between the defendant's action and the plaintiff's harm. This complexity can hinder the discharge of torts and necessitate an in-depth analysis. Example, asbestos exposure. In cases involving asbestos exposure, determining which party is responsible for the harm can be challenging due to the latency period of asbestos-related diseases. Multiple parties such as manufacturers, distributors, and employers may be involved, requiring a detailed examination of causation. Evolving standards of care. The discharge of torts often hinges on whether the defendant breached a duty of care. However, evolving standards of care, especially in areas like healthcare and technology, can complicate assessments of negligence. Let's see that through an example. Telemedicine and medical malpractice. As telemedicine becomes more prevalent, standards of care in remote healthcare settings may evolve. Discharging torts in medical malpractice cases involving telemedicine requires consideration of whether the healthcare provider adhered to the appropriate standard of care given the circumstances. Inadequate remedies for non-personal injuries. Tort law traditionally focuses on personal injuries, and the discharge of torts is designed to provide remedies for physical or emotional harm. However, some torts, such as economic torts or interference with economic relations, may not always result in adequate remedies. For example, tortious interference with contract. In cases of tortious interference with contract, where a third party intentionally disrupts a contractual relationship, the discharge of torts may involve challenges in quantifying economic losses and providing appropriate remedies. International considerations in the discharge of torts. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, international considerations play a significant role in the discharge of torts. Issues of jurisdiction, choice of law, and the recognition of foreign judgments becomes very crucial in cross-border tort cases. Like, let's take forum shopping. Forum shopping, which is the practice of choosing a jurisdiction with favorable laws for a particular case, can complicate the discharge of torts. Parties may strategically select a jurisdiction that offers more advantageous legal remedies. Example, multinational corporations. When multinational corporations face tort claims, plaintiffs may strategically file lawsuits in jurisdictions with more favorable laws or where the legal system is perceived to be more sympathetic to the plaintiff's case. Discharging torts in such cases involves addressing forum shopping concerns and ensuring fairness in legal proceedings. The Hague Convention on Choice of Court Agreements. The Hague Convention on Choice of Court Agreements is an international treaty aimed at facilitating the enforcement of choice of court agreements and promoting predictability in cross-border disputes. Parties entering into contracts may choose a specific jurisdiction for resolving disputes, impacting the discharge of torts arising from those contracts. Example, contractual choice of court. If parties to a contract include a choice of court clause designating a particular jurisdiction for dispute resolution, the discharge of torts related to the contract may involve enforcing the choice of court agreement. This international framework aims to streamline the resolution of disputes and the discharge of torts in the chosen jurisdiction. Recognition of foreign judgments. Enforcing judgments obtained in one jurisdiction in another country requires compliance with the principles of comity and reciprocity. The discharge of torts across borders involves navigating the complexities of recognizing and enforcing foreign judgments. Example, enforcement of a US judgment in Europe. If a party obtains a judgment in the United States and seeks to enforce it in a European country, the discharge of torts may involve demonstrating that the foreign judgment meets the legal criteria for recognition and enforcement in the European jurisdiction. Now, coming to the conclusion, the discharge of torts is a nuanced and evolving area of law that requires a thorough understanding of legal principles, defenses, and emerging trends. From traditional defenses like self-defense to contemporary challenges involving digital and environmental torts, the landscape of tort law continues to expand. As legal systems adapt to technological advancements, societal shifts, and globalization, addressing the challenges in the discharge of torts becomes paramount. Balancing the rights of the plaintiffs with the need for fair and efficient legal processes remains a central concern. As legal practitioners, policymakers, and scholars continue to explore and refine the principles governing the discharge of torts, the legal landscape will undoubtedly evolve to meet the demands of a dynamic and interconnected world. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. Thank you so much.